Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the original royal reality show, a high-stakes game of love, power, and trying desperately not to lose your head. Literally, we're talking about King Henry VIII and his legendary lineup of 6 wives. Imagine the most toxic workplace imaginable, add crowns, subtract job security, and throw in a boss whose performance reviews often involve an executioner. This was the Tudor court, and these women were playing the most dangerous Game of Thrones. Spoiler alert. For 5 out of 6 contestants on England's Next Top Queen, the final prize involves an annulment or an axe. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations. You've landed a job at the court of Henry VIII. The pay is terrible, the hours are worse, but the gossip is first rate. Your main duty? Trying to look busy while the boss works through his relationship issues. Think of it as the ultimate internship from hell, but with better outfits and a significantly higher chance of decapitation. You are about to witness, up close and personal, the marital rollercoaster of a king obsessed with power, legacy, and, most importantly, producing a male heir, no matter the cost. Buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy and frequently bloody ride. Alright, let's set the scene. It's the early 1520 seconds. You're navigating the treacherous, perfumed corridors of the English court, trying desperately to look important while avoiding eye contact with anyone who actually is. And at the center of this glittering viper pit sits your boss, the big man himself, King Henry VIII. Forget the fat, gout-ridden tyrant you see in the later portraits. Right now, Henry is in his prime. He's tall, athletic, handsome, in a brutish sort of way, and radiates an ego so immense it probably has its own postcode. This is a man who genuinely believes he's been personally appointed by God to rule England, play tennis, compose mediocre lute music, and generally do whatever the hell he wants. He's charming when he needs to be, terrifying when he's bored, and possesses the impulse control of a particularly spoiled toddler with access to an executioner. He is, in short, the ultimate nightmare boss. Now, every king needs a queen, and Henry has one. A very respectable, very pious, and increasingly inconvenient one. Her name is Catherine of Aragon. She's a Spanish princess, daughter of the legendary Ferdinand and Isabella, the power couple who funded Columbus and basically invented Spain. Royalty doesn't get much more blue-blooded than that. She was even originally married to Henry's older brother, Arthur. But Arthur had the poor taste to die young, leaving Catherine a teenage widow and a diplomatic loose end. Henry, ever the gentleman and keen not to lose her dowry, swooped in and married her himself in 1509. Problem solved. For a while, things were fine. As royal marriages go, it wasn't terrible. Catherine was intelligent, dignified, and fiercely loyal. She even ruled England as regent, while Henry was off playing war games in France. They seemed like a solid team, a power couple for the ages. Their marriage has lasted nearly 20 years, an eternity by Tudor standards. There's just one tiny, nagging, dynasty-destroying problem. She keeps having girls, or worse, pregnancies that end in heartbreak and empty cradles. They have one surviving child, a bright and determined daughter named Mary, but in the brutal sexist lottery of 16th century succession, a daughter is a consolation prize. Henry doesn't need a princess, he needs a prince, a spare heir, a boy to carry on the glorious Tudor name, secure the throne, and prove that Henry is, in fact, God's favourite king. This isn't just a personal desire, it's a political obsession. The last time England had a succession crisis, It resulted in a bloody civil war called the Wars of the Roses. Henry is terrified of history repeating itself, mostly because it would be extremely inconvenient for him. So, here you are, 2 decades into the royal marriage. Catherine is now in her 40s, past what was considered reliable childbearing age. Henry is still strapping, still arrogant, and getting increasingly antsy. He looks at his queen, and he doesn't see his loyal wife of 2 decades. He sees a reproductive failure, a faulty piece of dynastic machinery. This isn't a marriage anymore. It's a high-stakes breeding program gone wrong. And the CEO is blaming the equipment. You can feel the tension in the air at court. Henry starts paying less attention to Catherine. His gaze lingers a little too long on the younger, more fertile ladies in waiting. He starts muttering about the Bible, specifically a passage in Leviticus that says a man shouldn't marry his brother's widow. Convenient, that. He conveniently ignores the part where Catherine swore her first marriage was never consummated, making the Leviticus argument legally dubious. But Henry isn't interested in theological debates. He's interested in results. And Catherine isn't delivering. He starts spending more time hunting, writing angry letters, and generally radiating the quiet menace of a man who is about to make a spectacularly bad decision. He looks at Catherine, his loyal, pious, and aging Spanish queen, and he sees the past. He sees failure. He looks around the court, at the bright young things vying for his attention, and he sees the future, or at least a potential future incubator for his precious male heir. The starter wife has served her purpose, but she hasn't produced the required result. The warranty has expired. The boss is getting impatient. He needs a solution. A younger model, perhaps? One with fewer miles on the clock and a better track record? The whispers have already started. There's a particular lady in waiting, dark-eyed, witty, and dangerously ambitious. Her name is Anne Boleyn. And Henry is starting to look at her not just as a potential mistress, but as a potential upgrade. The great marital drama of the century is about to begin, and you have a front row seat. Try not to get any blood on your tunic. Your boss, King Henry, is having a midlife crisis. His wife, Queen Catherine, is loyal, pious, and politically useful, but she's failed the one KPI that matters, producing a male heir. He's starting to look around the the court, for a replacement, and his eyes land on someone who is definitely not like the current model. Enter Anne Boleyn. She's one of Queen Catherine's ladies in waiting, which makes this the ultimate HR nightmare. Anne isn't just another pretty face in the background. She's witty, stylish, speaks fluent French, a major plus in the snobby world of European courts, and possesses an ambition so sharp it could cut glass. She's seen how this game is played. She knows the king has a wandering eye and a habit of collecting mistresses like their limited edition stamps, but Anne has bigger plans. She's not interested in being the royal side piece, the weekend fling who gets a nice manor house and then quietly disappears when the king gets bored. No. She wants the crown or nothing. Congratulations, Henry. You've just met your match. At first, Henry probably thinks this is just another conquest. He turns on the charm. He expects Anne to swoon, grateful for the attention of the most powerful man in England. He sends her gifts. He writes her letters, passionate, slightly embarrassing love letters that somehow survive to this day, proving that even kings can sound like desperate teenagers when they're trying too hard. But Anne doesn't play along. She politely refuses his advances. She sends back his gifts. She tells him, essentially, thanks, but no thanks, unless you put a ring on it, a crown specifically. This, for Henry, is completely baffling. Women are supposed to want to be his mistress. It's a career upgrade, but Anne holds firm. She understands the power dynamic. By saying no, she makes herself the one thing Henry cannot stand, unattainable. And like a spoiled child denied a toy, his interest turns into a full-blown, all-consuming obsession. You watch this unfold from the sidelines, trying to look inconspicuous. The atmosphere at court becomes electric. Everyone knows what's happening. Catherine knows. Anne knows. Henry definitely knows. It's the most awkward office romance in history, playing out in public, with the fate of the kingdom hanging in the balance. Henry becomes utterly consumed. He spends less time on state affairs and more time figuring out how to get Anne to say yes. He showers her with gifts she keeps refusing. He gives her titles and estates. He promotes her family members to positions of power. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, must be absolutely thrilled. His daughter's refusal to sleep with the king is turning into the best career move the family ever made. Henry is acting less like a king and more like a lovesick teenager with absolute power and zero impulse control. He neglects Catherine, who maintains a stoic, dignified silence that only seems to annoy him further. He spends hours composing love poems, probably terrible ones. He loses interest in hunting, in jousting, in everything except Anne. She has completely hijacked his attention. You see them talking in corners, Anne witty and challenging, Henry utterly captivated. It's clear she's not just beautiful, she's intelligent. She engages him in debates about religion and politics, introducing him to the new, radical ideas of the Protestant Reformation that are sweeping across Europe. She's not just aiming for his bed, she's aiming for his mind. And maybe his soul. The court divides into factions. Team Catherine, the old guard, the traditionalists. Team Anne, the reformers, the ambitious, the ones betting on the future. You have to choose a side carefully. A wrong move now could end your career or your life. The tension is unbearable. Catherine is still queen, but Anne is acting like she already has the job, holding her own rival court, surrounding herself with allies. It's like watching two CEOs battling for control of the company, except the company is England, and the loser might get executed. Henry, meanwhile, is stuck. He's obsessed with Anne, but he's still married to Catherine. He needs a way out. He needs a divorce. Or, as they politely called it back then, an annulment. He needs someone to declare that his marriage to Catherine was never valid in the first place, freeing him up to make an honest woman and a queen out of Anne. There's just one problem. The only person with the authority to grant such an annulment is the Pope, and the Pope is currently sort of Catherine's nephew's prisoner. This is about to get messy. Really, really messy. Henry's obsession has led him to a dead end. And when Henry VIII hits a dead end, he doesn't turn around. He gets out a bulldozer. Or, in this case, dismantles the entire religious structure of his country. All for a woman who won't say yes. So, your boss, King Henry, is head over heels for the new girl, Anne Boleyn. He's decided Catherine of Aragon, his wife of 20 years, is surplus to requirements. In his mind, this should be simple. He's the king. He wants a divorce. Sorry, an annulment. It's basically a royal HR request. Terminate the contract with the current spouse, effective immediately, and onboard the new one. Easy peasy. There's just one tiny snag. The ultimate head office, the final arbiter of all marital contracts in Christendom, is the Pope in Rome. And Pope Clement VII is proving to be remarkably uncooperative. He won't grant the annulment. Why? Because Catherine isn't going down without a fight. Catherine insists her first marriage to Henry's dead brother, Arthur, was never consummated. This is crucial. Henry's entire argument for the annulment rests on a flimsy interpretation of a Bible verse from Leviticus that says you shouldn't marry your brother's widow. But if Catherine and Arthur never actually did the deed, then technically she wasn't his widow in the full sense, which means her marriage to Henry is perfectly valid. It's the 16th century equivalent of arguing over a loophole in the terms of service, and Catherine has read the fine print. She stands firm, dignified, and defiant. She's been Queen of England for 2 decades. and she's not about to be downgraded to dowager princess who bore the king no sons. Now, normally, a pope might find a way to accommodate a powerful king like Henry. A little theological flexibility goes a long way when emperors owe you money. But Pope Clement has his own problems. Namely, Catherine's nephew is Emperor Charles V, the most powerful man in Europe, and Charles's armies have recently sacked Rome and basically put the Pope under house arrest. Charles is very protective of his Aunt Catherine's honour and her political usefulness. So, Clement is stuck between a rock, an angry English king, and a hard place, an emperor who controls his city. He does what any sensible middle manager does when faced with an impossible situation. He stalls. He forms committees. He requests further documentation. He hopes the problem will just go away. Spoiler, it doesn't. Henry VIII is not a man known for his patience. He wants Anne. He wants a son. And he wants them now. He sends envoys to Rome. He sends threats. He sends bribes. Nothing works. The Pope keeps waffling, Catherine keeps refusing to go quietly to a nunnery, and Anne keeps refusing to become Henry's mistress until she's queen. You watch this bureaucratic nightmare drag on for years. The king grows increasingly furious. His legendary temper, usually reserved for bad tennis games or poorly cooked swans, is now a permanent fixture at court. You learn to gauge his mood by the vein throbbing in his temple. It's like living with a dormant volcano that occasionally demands a new wife. The court is paralyzed. No one knows which queen to support. Supporting Catherine is loyal but politically suicidal. Supporting Anne is ambitious but potentially treasonous if Henry fails. You spend your days mastering the art of the non-committal smile and avoiding direct questions. It's exhausting. Finally, after years of papal procrastination, Henry has a brilliant, terrifying, and utterly revolutionary idea. If the Pope won't play ball, start your own game. If the established rules don't give you what you want, rewrite the rulebook. If the Catholic Church won't grant his annulment, fine. He'll create his own church, a church that will. This isn't just changing religions like you might change your favorite brand of beer. This is a corporate takeover of God himself. He breaks England away from the Catholic Church. Through a series of acts of Parliament, he declares that the Pope has no authority in England. He seizes the Church's lands and wealth, a convenient bonus. And then, the masterstroke. He declares himself the supreme head of the Church of England. Congratulations, Henry. You've just given yourself a divine promotion. You're not just king anymore. You're the Pope of England too. Now that he's in charge of the rules, getting the annulment is easy. He appoints a new, compliant Archbishop of Canterbury, a man named Thomas Cranmer, who understands which side his ecclesiastical bread is buttered on. Cranmer convenes a court, reviews the evidence, and, shocker, declares Henry's marriage to Catherine null and void. Invalid. Kaput. 24 years of marriage, erased with a pen stroke. Henry is finally free. He marries Anne Boleyn in secret, then publicly acknowledges her as his queen. Catherine is banished from court, stripped of her title, and forbidden from seeing her daughter Mary. It's brutal, efficient, and legally sanctioned by Henry's brand new church. Problem solved. Sort of. Because you don't just rip up 1,000 years of religious tradition and expect everyone to be fine with it. Henry has his queen, but he's also plunged England into religious turmoil, made enemies of the most powerful rulers in Europe, and executed anyone who disagrees with his new job title. The ultimate HR dispute has been resolved, but the fallout is just beginning, and you are right in the middle of it. Good luck. So, Henry has flipped the bird at the Pope, started his own church, and officially declared his first marriage null and void. Congratulations! England is now religiously independent and politically isolated. But hey, at least the boss got his divorce. Now, finally, he can make an honest woman out of Anne Boleyn. The wedding itself is initially done in secret, probably because technically Henry is still married to Catherine in the eyes of everyone except himself and his pet archbishop. But once the paperwork is sorted, Tudor style, meaning Henry just declares it's sorted, it's time for the main event. Anne is queen, and she gets a coronation so lavish it makes Catherine's look like a budget affair. You watch the procession, the river pageants, the banquets. It's a spectacle designed to shout, "Look world, I'm the real queen now. No refunds." Anne is radiant, triumphant, maybe a little smug. She's played the long game, refused to be a mistress, and won the ultimate prize. She's the ultimate Tudor girl boss. Everything seems perfect, except for one looming deadline. The real reason Henry went through all this trouble, breaking with Rome, alienating half of Europe, executing his loyal Chancellor Thomas More, was not just for love. It was for a son, an heir. Anne's primary job, now that she has the crown, is to produce a healthy baby boy. Pronto, the entire kingdom holds its breath. Anne is pregnant almost immediately. Perfect. This must be it. God clearly approves of Henry's new church and his new wife. Astrologers are consulted, prayers are offered, the royal nursery is prepared, probably painted blue just in case. You can feel the anticipation building at court. Every conversation revolves around the impending birth. Will it be a boy? Of course, it must be a boy. Henry is strutting around like a proud peacock, already planning the jousts and celebrations for the birth of his prince. Anne is glowing, secure in her victory. And then, in September 1533, the baby arrives. It's healthy. It's beautiful. It is a girl. Awkward. The collective gasp at court is almost audible. A girl? After all that? After plunging the entire country into religious schism? After pissing off the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor? All for another daughter? Henry is displeased. That's putting it mildly. He cancels the celebratory jousts. He tries to put on a brave face, but you can see the disappointment etched onto his features. He names her Elizabeth, after his own mother. But it's clear this is not the product he ordered. It's like launching a revolutionary new iPhone, and it turns out to be just another phone. Nice, but not what was promised. Suddenly, Anne's position doesn't feel quite so secure. She's queen, yes, but her primary function remains unfulfilled. The pressure mounts. Henry still needs that son. Anne knows her survival depends on it. She's seen what happens to queens who fail to deliver. Catherine of Aragon lasted 24 years based on past performance and diplomatic immunity. Anne doesn't have that luxury. Her entire position is built on Henry's infatuation and her promise of a male heir. One of those is already fading. The other is looking increasingly unlikely. Anne tries again and again. But the subsequent pregnancies are a disaster. Miscarriages follow. Each one is a political crisis as much as a personal tragedy. With each failure, Henry's patience wears thinner. His famous charm starts to curdle into resentment. That witty banter he once found so captivating, now it just sounds argumentative. That ambition he admired, now it looks like arrogance. The very qualities that made Anne so alluring when she was the forbidden fruit are becoming irritating now that she's the queen who can't deliver the goods. The mood at court darkens. You watch Anne, once so confident and radiant, become increasingly anxious. She snaps at her ladies in waiting. She argues with the king. She knows she's on thin ice. Henry starts spending less time in her apartments. His eye, that notoriously restless royal eye, begins to wander. You notice him paying particular attention to one of Anne's own ladies in waiting, a quiet, pale, blonde girl named Jane Seymour. Uh-oh. You've seen this movie before. Anne makes one last, desperate gamble. She becomes pregnant again in late 1535. This has to be it. A boy. It has to be. The fate of her life, quite literally, hangs in the balance. Then, in January 1536, disaster strikes. Henry suffers a serious fall during a jousting tournament. For several hours he lies unconscious, and everyone thinks he's dead. The shock, combined with the stress, causes Anne to miscarry. And the baby? The final hope? It was, they say, a boy. That's it. Game over. Henry is convinced. This marriage is cursed, just like his first one. God clearly does not approve. Anne Boleyn, the miracle upgrade, the woman he ripped his kingdom apart for, isn't delivering the required features. And Henry VIII is not the kind of customer who keeps faulty goods. He's already eyeing the replacement model. Anne's brief, dazzling, and ultimately tragic reign is about to come to a very abrupt, very messy end. The miscarriage of the male heir is the final straw. You can practically hear the career guillotine sharpening in the background. Your boss, King Henry, isn't just disappointed, he's furious. He's gone through hell and high water for Anne, broken with Rome, executed his friends, alienated half of Europe, all based on her promise of a son. And she failed. In Henry's world, failure isn't an option. It's grounds for immediate termination, with extreme prejudice. Suddenly, everything Henry once loved about Anne becomes everything he hates. That brilliant wit that captivated him, now it's just annoying backtalk. That fierce ambition he admired, now it looks dangerously treasonous. Her sophisticated French manners, clearly evidence of loose morals. It's amazing how quickly love can curdle into lethal irritation when your eye starts wandering again. And, oh, has it wandered? He's noticed Jane Seymour. She's one of Anne's own ladies in waiting, because Henry apparently loves to recruit from within the existing team. Jane is everything. Anne is not. Quiet, demure, seemingly sweet, natured, and most importantly new. She presents a soothing, uncomplicated alternative to the high-maintenance drama Queen Anne has become. Henry starts sending Jane gifts. You see him chatting with her in corners. The pattern is depressingly familiar. The old model is being phased out. The new one is already in production. But how do you get rid of a queen, especially one you literally changed the religion of the country for? Simple. You don't just fire her, you destroy her. Trumped-up charges appear out of nowhere, seemingly overnight, and they are spectacular. Anne isn't just accused of failing to produce an heir. She's accused of adultery, not with one man, but with multiple men, including musicians, courtiers, and even her own brother, George Boleyn. Incest. That's a bold choice, even for Henry. But wait, there's more. She's also accused of witchcraft, because of course, and plotting to kill the king. It's a laundry list of the most heinous crimes imaginable. A character assassination designed not just to remove her, but to obliterate her reputation so thoroughly that no one will question Henry's decision to get rid of her. Spoiler, they're almost certainly nonsense. Anne was ambitious, yes, maybe flirtatious, but a witch who slept with her own brother and half the male population of the court while simultaneously plotting to poison the king. It stretches credulity, even by Tudor standards. This isn't an investigation. It's a meticulously crafted frame job. It's an HR performance review from hell, where the only outcome is decapitation. Anne is swiftly tried. The trial is a joke. The evidence is flimsy, based on gossip, tortured confessions, and Henry's absolute certainty that he's the victim here. Anne defends herself intelligently, eloquently, but it doesn't matter. The verdict is a foregone conclusion, guilty of everything. Her brother and the other accused men are quickly executed. Then comes Anne's turn. But Henry, in a final, bizarre gesture that's either mercy or peak psychological cruelty, grants her a special execution. Not the common axe, which could be messy. No. Anne gets an expert French swordsman brought over specially for the occasion because apparently Henry is classy like that. On the 19th of May, 1536, Anne Boleyn walks calmly to the scaffold at the Tower of London. She gives a dignified final speech, praising the king, because what else can you do, and praying for his soul. The swordsman does his job cleanly. One stroke. Her brief, dazzling, and ultimately fatal reign is over. She lasted just 3 years as queen. You breathe a sigh of relief. The drama is over. The king got what he wanted. Maybe things will finally calm down now. Wrong. Henry marries Jane Seymour a mere 11 days later. Because grief is inefficient. The ink on Anne's death warrant is barely dry, the blood on the scaffold barely scrubbed away, and Henry is already at the altar, ready for wife number 3. You just shake your head and update your mental org chart. Queen Anne is out, Queen Jane is in, and you silently pray that this one lasts a little longer, and, more importantly, that she has a boy, quickly. So, Anne Boleyn's head is off, and your boss Henry has wasted no time installing wife number 3. Meet Queen Jane Seymour. She's the polar opposite of Anne. Where Anne was fiery, witty and ambitious, Jane is quiet, demure, and seems about as politically threatening as a decorative cushion. You almost feel sorry for her. She stepped into a role with a notoriously high turnover rate, and her main qualification seems to be not Anne Boleyn. Her job description is simple, brutal, and non-negotiable. Produce a male heir, or else. You watch Jane navigate the court with a quiet grace. She's kind to the discarded Princess Mary, Catherine of Aragon's daughter, trying to mend the family bridges Henry keeps blowing up. She's pious. She's gentle. She's, honestly, a bit boring compared to the fireworks of the Anne Boleyn era. But maybe boring is what Henry needs right now. Someone soothing, someone uncomplicated, someone whose primary function is biological, not intellectual. And then, the news everyone has been praying for, or dreading, depending on which faction you belong to. Queen Jane is pregnant. The tension at court ratchets up again. Is this it? Is this the one? Henry is a nervous wreck, oscillating between ecstatic hope and paranoid fear. He showers Jane with attention, orders constant prayers, and probably consults every astrologer, physician, and random quack in a 50-mile radius. You can practically feel the weight of the entire kingdom resting on Jane's womb. No pressure, Jane. Just the future of the Tudor dynasty. The birth itself, in October 1537, is long and difficult. You wait outside the Queen's chambers along with the rest of the anxious court, listening to the muffled sounds within. Hours pass, days even. Childbirth in the 16th century isn't a beautiful miracle, it's a terrifying medical emergency with terrible odds. Finally, the cry of a healthy baby rings out, and then, the announcement that sends a wave of collective relief, and probably heavy drinking, through the palace. It's a boy. Prince Edward has arrived. Healthy, male, undeniably Henry's son. Henry is ecstatic, beyond ecstatic. He's finally done it. After nearly 30 years, 2 wives, a religious revolution, and countless executions, he has his male heir. God clearly approves of him after all. Jane is declared his only true wife, the one who finally fulfilled her sacred duty. She's the hero of the hour, the savior of the dynasty. Congratulations, Jane, you've won the game. The catch. Winning the Tudor wife game often comes with a terrible price. Just days after giving birth to the future King of England, Jane falls violently ill. The doctors flap around uselessly, muttering about imbalances and bad air. It's likely puerperal fever, or childbed fever, a bacterial infection that was the invisible killer of countless women after childbirth in an age before basic hygiene. The irony is brutal. She survives the perilous ordeal of childbirth only to be taken down by the filth on the hands of the very people trying to help her. Jane dies on the 24th of October 1537, just 12 days after her son's birth. Congratulations, Henry. Your greatest triumph comes with a swift kick from fate. You finally have your precious heir, but you've lost the wife who gave him to you. For a brief moment, the ruthless tyrant shows a flicker of genuine human grief. He is, by all accounts, truly devastated. He declares Jane his only true love, the perfect queen. He goes into mourning, and then, in the ultimate romantic, or perhaps just morbidly possessive, gesture, he orders that he be buried next to her when his time comes. It's the highest honor he can bestow, a final declaration that she, the mother of his son, was the one who truly mattered. It's also a convenient way to ensure his spot next to the mother of the future king, securing his legacy. Even in grief, Henry knows good PR. So, Jane Seymour, the quiet queen, achieves what the brilliant Catherine and the fiery Anne could not. She gives Henry his son, and in return, she gets a lavish funeral, the king's eternal gratitude, on paper at least, and the dubious honor of being the only one of Henry's wives he actually wanted to spend eternity with. Small comfort, perhaps, considering she only lasted about 18 months on the throne. The quest for a wife who could provide an heir and survive the experience was clearly proving more difficult than Henry had anticipated. The job opening for Queen of England is, once again, vacant. Applicants should be fertile, politically convenient, and preferably immune to 16th century infections. Good luck finding that combination. Right, so your boss, Henry, is technically single again. Queen Jane, the one who finally produced the male heir, promptly died, which was terribly inconvenient. Congratulations, Henry. You finally got the son, but the warranty on the manufacturer expired immediately. Now what? Well, Henry has his precious boy, Prince Edward. But Edward is small, fragile, and living in an era where surviving childhood is basically an extreme sport. One good plague, one bad fever, and the Tudor dynasty is back to square one. Henry needs insurance. He needs more sons, which means he needs another wife. Sigh, it's exhausting just watching him. But this time, it's not just about heirs, it's about politics. Europe is a mess of shifting alliances and religious tension, mostly thanks to Henry starting his own church just so he could get divorced. Your chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, a sharp, ruthless operator who makes Machiavelli look like a guidance counselor, sees an opportunity. He thinks England needs allies against the big Catholic powers, France and the Holy Roman Empire. His brilliant idea? Marry Henry off to a German Protestant princess. It's foreign policy via wedding ring. The political match is decided. Anne of Cleves, sister of a powerful German duke. Perfect on paper. Protestant? Check. Noble? Check. Available? Check. Strategic advantage? Check. There's just one small detail Henry cares about more than political stability. Is she hot? This is where things get modern. Since Henry can't exactly swipe right on Anne's profile, Cromwell does the next best thing. He sends the court's star painter, Hans Holbein the Younger, over to Germany with one simple instruction. Paint the princess, and for God's sake, make her look good. Holbein does his job, maybe a little too well. The portrait he sends back is flattering. Very flattering. It shows a demure, attractive young woman in elegant German attire. Henry looks at the painting. He trusts Holbein. He figures, all right, she'll do. He agrees based on the portrait. The contracts are signed. The alliance is secured. Anne sets sail for England. You can feel the buzz at court. Another royal wedding. Everyone loves a wedding, especially when the last queen died instead of being beheaded. It feels like progress. Henry, eager to meet his mail-order bride, decides to surprise her. He rides out in disguise to meet her entourage on the road to London. He bursts into the room where she's resting, expecting a scene from a romantic ballad. She'll see through his disguise, fall into his arms. Love at first sight. It does not go well. The reality is, less flattering than the portrait. Anne, raised in a small, conservative German court, has none of the sophisticated French polish Henry prefers. She speaks little English. She's plainly dressed. And Henry, a man whose romantic criteria are notoriously shallow, takes one look at the woman Holbein painted and the woman standing awkwardly before him, and his heart sinks. His immediate, brutally honest review? I like her not. It's the 16th century equivalent of being spectacularly catfished. But the wedding is already scheduled. The diplomats are arriving. Calling it off now would be a major international incident. Henry is trapped. He goes through with the ceremony in January 1540, looking about as enthusiastic as a man heading to his own execution. You watch him standing at the altar, his face a mask of regal misery. This is going to be good. Then comes the wedding night, the moment of truth. The next morning, Henry rushes to Cromwell, not with the glow of a happy newlywed, but with the fury of a man who's been sold faulty goods. The marriage, he declares, is a disaster. He finds Anne physically repulsive. He claims he couldn't perform his duties. He goes into graphic, embarrassing detail about her alleged physical imperfections, details no gentleman, let alone a king, should ever utter. But Henry has never been burdened by tact. His verdict? The marriage is apparently never consummated. This is crucial. Non-consummation is the magic eject button for a royal marriage. It means the contract was never truly sealed. It's the perfect excuse. Henry sees his escape route. He wants out. Now, poor Anne. You have to feel a bit sorry for her. She travelled all the way from Germany, married a grumpy, overweight king who clearly despises her, endured a humiliating wedding night where he probably just rolled over and snored, and now she's about to be publicly dumped after less time than it takes to break in a new pair of shoes. It's the ultimate blind date disaster, played out on the world stage. Henry has made his decision. Wife number 4's contract is about to be terminated. The only question is, will she keep her head attached? Your boss wants out. And when Henry VIII wants out of a marriage, out usually involves lawyers, questionable theology, or, failing that, axes. This time, thankfully for Anne of Cleves, it's mostly lawyers. The king makes it abundantly clear to anyone who will listen, and everyone has to listen, that the marriage is a dud, a non-starter, a royal lemon. He wants an annulment. Now, the official grounds are procured with impressive speed. Reason number 1, non-consummation. Henry loudly proclaims his inability to perform his royal duties, blaming Anne entirely. He offers graphic, humiliating details about her supposed physical flaws to his physicians and advisors, ensuring the entire court knows exactly why he finds her so unappealing. It's the ultimate act of Tudor gaslighting. It's not me, Your Majesty, it's definitely you. Reason number 2. A convenient, pre-existing pre-contract Anne supposedly had with Francis, Duke of Lorraine's son. It was flimsy, probably legally irrelevant, but Henry's lawyers seize on it like starving wolves. It's enough. The whole process takes just a few weeks. After just 6 months of awkward dinners and presumably silent, separate bedchambers, the marriage is declared null and void. Caput. 6 months. That's less time than it takes for some royal portraits to dry. It might be the quickest, most efficient royal annulment in history. Henry is free. Again, now comes the crucial moment for Anne. You watch, holding your breath. Will she fight it like Catherine of Aragon? Will she scream and rage like Anne Boleyn, allegedly? Will she end up in a drafty castle or on the execution block? Nope. Anne wisely agrees. She sees the writing on the wall. She knows fighting Henry is a losing game and the stakes are lethally high. She plays it smart, incredibly smart. She graciously accepts the king's decision, expresses her willingness to step aside, and basically says, "No hard feelings, Your Majesty. totally understand. Awkward. Henry is delighted. He loves it when people don't argue with him, especially when he's dumping them. In his relief, and perhaps a flicker of guilt, he is astonishingly generous. Anne avoids losing her head and gets a magnificent, generous settlement. She is given several large estates, including Hever Castle. Yes, the childhood home of Anne Boleyn. The irony is delicious. She gets a substantial annual income. And, best of all, she is granted the honorary title of the king's beloved sister. She trades the precarious title Queen for the much safer and more comfortable title Alive and Rich, which, let's be honest, is a pretty good deal in Henry's court. She lives comfortably in England for the rest of her life. She maintains a friendly, almost familial relationship with Henry. She's invited to court for holidays. She becomes close friends with Princesses Mary and Elizabeth. She manages her estates wisely. She basically retires in style, the wealthiest and most independent woman in the kingdom who isn't actually royal. And the final, glorious punchline? She outlives everyone. She outlives Henry. She outlives all 5 of his other wives. She outlives Henry's son, King Edward VI. She dies peacefully in her bed in 1557, during the reign of her former stepdaughter, Queen Mary I. Smart woman. She played the game, saw she couldn't win the throne, and opted for the much smarter prize, survival. But your court operates on a strict policy of blame. Someone has to pay for this embarrassing 6-month marital fiasco. And it sure isn't going to be the king. Henry needs a scapegoat for his own poor judgment and impulsive decisions. His furious gaze lands squarely on the man who arranged the whole thing, Thomas Cromwell. Cromwell, the brilliant, ruthless architect of the English Reformation, the man who had helped Henry break with Rome and seize the monasteries, had made one fatal mistake. He had recommended a wife the king found ugly. In Henry's court, political genius counts for nothing if you screw up the boss's dating life. Cromwell's enemies at court seize the opportunity. Charges are manufactured. Treason, heresy, the usual Tudor favourites. Cromwell, who had navigated the treacherous waters of Henry's court for years, suddenly finds himself sinking fast. He gets blamed and executed in July 1540, just days after Henry's marriage to Anne is officially annulled. It's a brutal, swift, and entirely predictable fall from grace. Because when the boss makes a bad hire, you fire the HR guy, especially when the HR guy also helped you dismantle the Catholic Church. So, the German alliance is dead. Cromwell is dead. Anne of Cleves is happily retired. Henry is single again. The court takes a collective breath, resets the marital scorecard, and wonders, who's next? You just hope the next one lasts longer than 6 months, and maybe looks better in person than she does in her portrait. Right, so your boss is single again. Wife number 4, Anne of Cleves, dodged the axe and walked away with a severance package that made her the envy of every ex-wife in history. Henry, meanwhile, is back on the market. And what does a man in his late 40s, increasingly overweight, suffering from painful leg ulcers and nursing a bruised ego do? He goes looking for someone young, very young. You barely have time to update your mental list of who's in and who's out before the next leading lady makes her entrance. Enter Catherine Howard. She's everything Anne of Cleves wasn't. English, petite, vivacious, and, most importantly, young enough to be Henry's daughter. Possibly his granddaughter, if he'd started early. She's also, in a twist that proves history has a dark sense of humour, the cousin of Anne Boleyn. Yes, wife number 2. The one Henry executed. Congratulations, Catherine. Welcome to the family. She's been kicking around court as a lady-in-waiting to Anne of Cleves, probably just trying to keep her head down and learn the ropes. But Henry, in his infinite capacity for disastrously inappropriate crushes, spots her. The aging, obese, and increasingly ill king, a man who probably needs help getting out of bed, is utterly smitten. She's pretty, she giggles at his jokes, or maybe just giggles in general, and she makes him feel, well, less old and decrepit. He starts calling her his rose without a thorn, which is adorable if you ignore the fact that the last woman associated with roses in his life ended up headless. Catherine, it must be said, is tragically naive. She wasn't raised with the same rigorous education and political savvy as Catherine of Aragon or Anne Boleyn. She grew up in the slightly chaotic household of her step-grandmother, where supervision was lax and morals were flexible. She's basically a teenager who's been thrown into the deep end of the world's most dangerous political shark tank, armed only with good looks and presumably terrible judgment. She's completely unprepared for the game she's about to play. Henry, however, isn't looking for a political advisor or an intellectual equal. He's had those. They ended badly. He's looking for a distraction, a pretty young thing to make him forget his festering leg sores and his rapidly approaching mortality. And Catherine fits the bill perfectly. He showers her with gifts. He parades her around court. You watch this May-December, more like February-December. Romance blossom with a growing sense of dread. It's like watching a particularly grim reality TV show. Elderly king seeks teenage queen. The wedding bells ring with alarming speed. They marry in July 1540, just 16 days after the ink dried on the Anne of Cleves annulment. No time wasted. Henry doesn't do long engagements anymore. Catherine is likely still a teenager, maybe 19, maybe younger. Henry, nearing 50, is positively giddy. He feels young again. He throws lavish parties. He buys Catherine extravagant jewels. He's convinced he's finally found true happiness. The kind that only comes when you marry someone less than half your age who finds your jokes funny. You have to admit, she does brighten up the court. She loves dancing, music and fashion. She brings a burst of youthful energy to the increasingly gloomy atmosphere surrounding the aging king. But you also notice the whispers, the sideways glances. Catherine, used to a certain amount of freedom and attention, doesn't quite grasp the level of scrutiny she's under now. She's Queen of England. Every word she says, every person she smiles at, is noted, analysed, and reported. And her past, the one she probably thought was left behind in her grandmother's house, has a nasty habit of catching up with people in Henry's court. For now, though, Henry is blissful. He has his rose without a thorn, his beautiful young bride. He's convinced this one, finally, will be different. She's not politically ambitious like Anne. She's not foreign like Catherine or Anne of Cleves. She's just a sweet, simple, pretty English girl. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Absolutely everything. Because Henry's rose, unfortunately, comes with quite a few thorns from her past, and they are about to prick the king's fragile ego in the most painful way imaginable. Your boss is happy, genuinely, giddily happy. His teenage queen, Catherine Howard, is everything he dreamed of. She's fun, she's pretty, she makes him feel like the dashing young king he hasn't been for about 30 years and 40 pounds. You almost want to be happy for him, almost. But you've been around this court long enough to know that Henry's happiness is usually just the calm before the storm. His rose without a thorn is about to reveal a few inconvenient prickles. The problem: Catherine is young, naive, and frankly a bit stupid about the realities of being queen. She grew up in a household where flirting and youthful indiscretions were common. She doesn't seem to grasp that the rules are different now. Drastically different. When you're Queen of England, your past isn't just your past, it's potential treason, and your present requires the kind of discretion Catherine seems incapable of comprehending. She still giggles with her ladies-in-waiting like she's at a sleepover. She still enjoys flirting. Flirting, when you're married to Henry VIII, is less a charming social interaction and more like juggling nitroglycerin. Catherine Howard has a history. Before she was queen, back when she was just a teenager in her step-grandmother's chaotic household, she had a rather serious relationship with a gentleman named Francis Derham. We're talking more than just holding hands. They apparently called each other husband and wife. It was teenage drama, the kind of thing most people grow out of and forget. Unless you become Queen of England. Then, it's Exhibit A in your future treason trial. Worse, Derham isn't just a distant memory. Seeing his former flame hit the royal jackpot, he makes the incredibly stupid decision to show up at court, presumably looking for a job or a handout. Catherine, even more stupidly, gives him a position in her household. Maybe she felt sorry for him. Maybe she was trying to buy his silence. Whatever the reason, she now has her ex-boyfriend working for her, right under the king's increasingly gouty nose. This is not just playing with fire. This is dousing yourself in oil and tap, dancing in a volcano. But wait, it gets better, because Catherine isn't just dealing with ghosts from her past. She decides to create some new ones. She starts a secret, flirtatious, and almost certainly physical relationship with one of Henry's favourite courtiers, a handsome young man named Thomas Culpeper. They exchange letters. They arrange secret nighttime meetings. Her lady-in-waiting, Lady Rochford, who, incidentally, is the widow of George Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's executed brother, because this court is just one big, incestuous, backstabbing family reunion, acts as the go-between. Let's just pause and appreciate the sheer breathtaking stupidity of this. You are the Queen of England. Your husband is Henry VIII, a man who executed his last wife on dubious charges of adultery. And you decide it's a good idea to have secret trysts with another man in the palace. This isn't just reckless, it's practically suicidal. This is not just adultery, it's treason. Adultery by a queen implies the possibility of a non-royal heir, and that, in Henry's book, is the ultimate crime, the discovery. You can't keep secrets like this at court. The walls literally have ears, and spies hiding behind the tapestries. The rumours start as whispers among the servants. A guard sees Culpeper leaving the Queen's chambers late at night. A lady-in-waiting overhears a suspicious conversation. Jealous rivals, sensing an opportunity to bring down the Howard family faction, start collecting evidence. It's only a matter of time. The information eventually makes its way to someone who has to act on it. Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. Yes, the same Archbishop Cranmer who helped Henry get rid of Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. He probably sighs, thinking, "Oh, here we go again." Cranmer receives a letter detailing the Queen's past relationship with Derham and her current dalliance with Culpeper. He knows he can't ignore it. Keeping this from the king is treason in itself. An investigation begins, quietly at first. Cranmer and a few trusted members of the King's Council start interviewing Catherine's household staff. The ladies-in-waiting crack under pressure. Francis Derham is arrested and confesses, probably under torture, about his premarital relationship with Catherine. Then they arrest Culpeper. They find incriminating letters. Lady Rochford, realizing the game is up, confesses everything she knows to save herself. Spoiler, it doesn't work. The investigation confirms the worst. It's all true. The Queen had a past, and she has most definitely been having an affair. Now comes the hardest part, telling Henry. You can imagine the scene. Cranmer, trembling, slips a note into the king's hand during Mass, detailing the accusations. Henry initially refuses to believe it. His rose without a thorn? Impossible. She's pure. She's innocent. He orders Cranmer to investigate further, probably hoping it's all just malicious gossip. But the evidence keeps piling up. The confessions are detailed, specific, and damning. There's no escaping it. Henry, the aging king who thought he'd finally found youthful joy, realizes he's been played. His beautiful young queen, the symbol of his renewed vitality, is not a rose without a thorn. She's a thorny, complicated, and deeply unfaithful woman. Henry is devastated. His ego is shattered. But his devastation quickly turns to something far more dangerous. Fury. The fury of a king betrayed. The fury of a man made to look like a fool. And you know what happens when Henry VIII gets furious? Someone, usually female, is about to have a very bad day. Your boss is furious. Not just regular, run-of-the-mill, someone ate the last figgy pudding furious. This is Henry VIII, betrayed husband, national laughingstock furious. And that is a level of fury that usually requires a significant body count to appease. His rose without a thorn has turned out to be a thorny, promiscuous weed, and Henry is reaching for the royal weed whacker, the axe. First, the supporting cast needs to be dealt with. Francis Derham, the ex-boyfriend from Catherine's past, and Thomas Culpeper, the current, and now very former, fling, are arrested. You don't need a crystal ball to see where this is going. They are charged with treason. Because sleeping with the Queen, or having slept with her before she was Queen and being stupid enough to show up later, is apparently treason. Tudor logic. Don't question it. They are tried, found guilty, obviously, and executed in December 1541 with the full, gruesome spectacle reserved for traitors. Derham gets the particularly nasty sentence of being hanged, drawn, and quartered. Culpeper, thanks to his noble connections, gets the slightly more merciful beheading. Small favours. Now, what about the Queen herself? Henry strips her of her title. She's no longer Queen Catherine, she's just Catherine Howard, disgraced teenager. She's imprisoned, first at Sion Abbey, then moved to the familiar, drafty, and extremely ominous confines of the Tower of London. You can imagine her terror. She's barely out of her teens, locked in the same fortress where her cousin Anne Boleyn lost her head just a few years earlier. The historical déjà vu must be suffocating. There's a slight legal hiccup. While adultery by a queen is treason, Catherine's pre-marital activities weren't technically illegal at the time she committed them. Henry, never one to let minor legal details stand in the way of a good execution, gets Parliament to pass a special Act of Attainder. This handy piece of legislation basically declares Catherine guilty of treason without the need for a formal trial. It also makes it treason for any woman with a promiscuous past to marry the king without disclosing said past. Congratulations, ladies. Honesty is now legally required, or you lose your head. It's like a retroactive morality clause, written specifically to ensure Catherine doesn't slip through the cracks. Her fate is sealed. On the 13th of February 1542, Catherine Howard, the girl who just wanted to dance and flirt and maybe didn't quite grasp the concept of treason, follows her lovers to the block at the Tower of London. She is, by most estimates, maybe 19 years old. Reports say she spent the night before her execution practicing how to lay her head on the block gracefully, even facing death. The pressure to perform, to maintain appearances, is relentless. Her final moments are a subject of historical debate, but one persistent rumour claims her final words were not a prayer for the king or a plea for forgiveness. They were reportedly about her love for Culpeper. If true, that's the ultimate final insult to Henry's already shattered ego. Ouch. Executed alongside her is her lady-in-waiting, Lady Rochford, the woman who facilitated the affair and whose testimony helped condemn both Catherine Howard and, years earlier, her own husband and sister-in-law, George and Anne Boleyn. Irony just follows this family around like a stray dog. Henry doesn't attend the execution. He's probably too busy nursing his wounded pride and maybe interviewing candidates for wife number 6. The brief, tragic, and frankly idiotic saga of Catherine Howard is over. The court breathes a collective sigh of relief, scrubs the blood off the cobblestones, metaphorically, mostly, and gets ready for the next chapter. Lesson learned. Maybe don't marry someone young enough to be your granddaughter, especially if you have a well-documented habit of executing your wives. It rarely ends well, and definitely don't hire your queen's ex-boyfriend to work in the palace. That's just asking for trouble. Right, so your boss has just executed his teenage wife for treasonous flirting. Congratulations. The job opening for Queen of England is vacant. again. But this time, the vibe is different. Henry isn't looking for a dazzling beauty or a political pawn. Henry is now old, obese, and suffering from weeping, painful leg ulcers that make his temper even more volcanic than usual. He smells faintly of decaying flesh masked by expensive perfume. Let's be honest, he's a wreck. He doesn't need a trophy wife. He needs a companion. He needs a nurse. He needs someone sensible enough to manage his failing health and volatile moods without getting herself executed. Enter candidate number 6, Catherine Parr. She's not some naive young thing fresh to the court. Catherine is a mature, intelligent and kind noblewoman in her early 30s. And here's her killer resume point. She's twice widowed. This isn't her first rodeo. She knows how to manage difficult husbands. Both her previous ones were older and unwell. She's basically a professional caregiver with a title. Plus, she's known for her deep piety and Protestant beliefs, which aligns nicely with Henry's new church, when he's not having Protestants burned for heresy anyway. The courtship, if you can call it that, is less whirlwind romance and more like a very serious job interview. Henry isn't writing love poems this time. He's probably asking about her patience, her ability to tolerate loud groaning, and her stance on changing disgusting bandages. You watch this unfold and think, finally, a sensible choice. Catherine isn't marrying for passion. She's probably marrying for survival, security, and maybe a chance to push her religious agenda. She knows exactly what she's getting into, becoming the live-in nurse for the most powerful and dangerous patient in the kingdom. He marries Catherine Parr in 1543, and she acts primarily as his nurse and companion. Your job at court just got slightly less stressful, because Catherine seems genuinely good at managing the king. She's patient with his rages. She engages him in intellectual conversation. She's highly educated and even writes her own religious books. She reads to him. She oversees his medical care, probably trying to subtly introduce concepts like maybe don't treat gangrene with powdered pearls. She brings a sense of calm and stability to the chaotic final years of his reign. It's less a marriage and more like palliative care with crown jewels. But Catherine Parr isn't just a glorified caregiver. She's smart, and she uses her position to achieve something remarkable, something that will change the course of English history. Crucially, she also helps reconcile Henry with his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. Remember them? Mary, daughter of Catherine of Aragon, declared illegitimate and banished. Elizabeth, daughter of Anne Boleyn, declared illegitimate and ignored. They've spent years in the political wilderness, their futures uncertain. Catherine Parr, perhaps remembering her own precarious position, takes them under her wing. She treats them with kindness. She encourages their education. And most importantly, she persuades Henry to formally restore them to the line of succession. This is huge. It's a masterful piece of diplomacy, and possibly just basic human decency, a rare commodity in Henry's court. Through an Act of Parliament in 1544, Mary and Elizabeth are officially put back in line to the throne after their half-brother, Edward. Catherine doesn't just give Henry comfort in his old age. She helps secure the future stability of the kingdom. She essentially ensures that England will eventually be ruled by two of the daughters Henry himself had discarded. The irony is thicker than Henry's waistline. So, Catherine Parr turns out to be the surprise MVP of Henry's wives. She doesn't give him another son. She doesn't forge a major political alliance. Instead, she provides comfort, stability, and quietly fixes one of Henry's biggest, most damaging mistakes by bringing his daughters back into the fold. You almost start to think Henry might finally end his marital career on a high note. A stable marriage, a reconciled family. Maybe he's finally learned his lesson. Spoiler, he hasn't. Because even sensible, kind Catherine Parr will soon find herself one theological argument away from the executioner's block. Henry might be old, but he's still Henry. And being Mrs. Henry VIII is always a dangerous game. You almost start to relax. Queen number 6, Catherine Parr, seems to have cracked the code. She's sensible, she's kind, she's managing the king's temper and his festering leg ulcers like a seasoned pro. She even got Henry to put his daughters back in the will. Maybe, just maybe, this one will end peacefully. Maybe Henry has finally chilled out in his old age. Wrong again, because your boss might be old and sick, but he's still Henry VIII. And Catherine Parr has one potentially fatal flaw. She has opinions. Specifically, she has strong reformist religious views. She's a devout Protestant, and she enjoys discussing theology. Discussing theology with Henry VIII is like juggling flaming swords while standing on a tightrope over a shark tank. It requires extreme skill and perfect timing. One wrong move, and you're dinner. Conservative factions at court, led by Bishop Gardiner, a man who makes Darth Vader look warm and fuzzy, hate Catherine's influence. They see her Protestant leanings as heresy, and they see her as a threat to their own power. So, they do what disgruntled executives have done since the dawn of time. They plot to get the boss's favourite fired. Or, in this case, arrested for heresy, which is the Tudor equivalent of being reported to HR with a guaranteed outcome involving fire. They start whispering in Henry's ear. Your Majesty, the Queen reads forbidden books. She questions established doctrine. She dares to debate with you, God's chosen representative on earth. Henry, whose ego is now roughly the size of France and twice as fragile, starts to listen. He's always been paranoid about heresy, and the idea that his own wife, the woman changing his bandages, might be disagreeing with his infallible religious opinions? Unacceptable. Close call. An arrest warrant is actually drawn up. Gardiner's faction is ready to pounce. Catherine Parr is one bad mood away from joining Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard in the Tower's Alumni Association. But Catherine is smart. Word reaches her that the wolves are circling. Does she panic? Does she flee? No. She cleverly saves herself by appealing to Henry's ego. She requests an audience with the king. She finds him in pain, irritable. Instead of arguing about theology, she plays the meek, devoted wife. She tells him she only debates with him to learn from his magnificent wisdom, that she, a mere woman, could never truly understand such complex matters without his guidance. She essentially tells him he's the smartest theologian in the room and she just loves listening to him talk. It works. Brilliantly. Henry's colossal ego purrs like a well-fed lion. Of course, she only argues to learn from him. Of course, he's the expert. He cancels the arrest warrant. He tells Gardiner and his cronies to back off. Catherine Parr hasn't just saved her neck. She's given a masterclass in managing upwards. Rule number 1 of surviving Henry VIII. Always make him think he's the smartest person in the room, even when, especially when, he isn't. Catherine lives to nurse another day. And not for much longer, as it turns out. Henry VIII dies on the 28th of January 1547. He's 55 years old, but his body is worn out from decades of excess, illness, and probably sheer rage. The end of the reign comes not with a bang, but with a wheeze. The great tyrant, the man who reshaped England in his own image, finally succumbs to his failing health. Catherine Parr survives him. Congratulations, Catherine. You join the exclusive club of Henry VIII wives who made it out alive, population 2, besides Anne of Cleves. You attend the funeral, look appropriately sad, and probably breathe the biggest sigh of relief of your entire life. Freedom, but Catherine isn't one to sit around enjoying widowhood for long. Just a few months after Henry kicks the bucket, she quickly marries again. And who does she marry? Thomas Seymour. Yes, that Thomas Seymour, uncle to the new boy king Edward VI, and the same charming creep who got dangerously inappropriate with the teenage Princess Elizabeth years earlier. You have to wonder about Catherine's taste in men. Maybe she just really likes fixing up problematic guys. Unfortunately, this final chapter doesn't have a happy ending either. Catherine becomes pregnant for the first time, a lifelong dream. But in September 1548, just over a year after surviving Henry, she dies in childbirth, probably from that same old enemy, childbed fever. It's a final, cruel twist of Tudor fate. The sensible sixth wife, the survivor, the one who navigated the treacherous court of Henry VIII with such skill, ultimately succumbs to the simple, brutal dangers of 16th century biology. So ends the saga of Henry VIII and his 6 wives. A story of love, loss, ambition, betrayal, beheadings, and some truly terrible decision-making. Henry got his heir, but his dynasty would end just 1 generation later with his brilliant, unmarried daughter, Elizabeth. The women he married, divorced, executed, and survived became legends, their stories forever intertwined with his. And you survived your time at his court. Barely. Time to find a less stressful job. Maybe something simple, like bear baiting. So, the great King Henry VIII is finally dead, gone to meet his maker, and presumably have a very awkward conversation about his interpretation of marital vows. You survived. Your pension is probably terrible, but your head is still attached, which counts as a major win in this administration. Now, let's tally the final score in Henry's matrimonial marathon. 6 wives entered the game. The results? Divorced, Catherine of Aragon; banished, died alone; beheaded, Anne Boleyn; framed, executed; died, Jane Seymour. Natural causes, post-childbirth. The only one he wanted to be buried with. Divorced, Anne of Cleves; smartly negotiated a generous severance package. Beheaded, Catherine Howard; young, foolish, executed. Survived, Catherine Parr; outlived him, then promptly married again, and died in childbirth anyway. It's less a list of queens and more like a casualty report from a particularly messy season of reality television. You look back on the decades you've spent navigating this court, ducking behind tapestries during royal arguments, trying to guess which wife was currently in favour, and mostly just hoping not to get accidentally implicated in someone else's treason. The sheer chaos and human cost are staggering. 2 queens executed on trumped-up charges. 1 queen banished and separated from her child. Another dying from the very act that was supposed to secure her position. It's a blood-soaked soap opera, all driven by one man's colossal ego and his desperate, all-consuming obsession with getting a male heir. Why the obsession? Dynastic security mostly. Henry genuinely feared another civil war if he died without a clear male successor. But let's be honest, it was also about pride. A king needed a son to prove his virility, his divine favour, his kingliness. Having only daughters was seen as a personal failure, a biological insult, and Henry VIII did not handle insults well. His quest for a son wasn't just politics, it was therapy. Bad, expensive, and frequently lethal therapy performed on a national scale. So, did he get what he wanted in the end? The legacy? Well, yes and no. Henry got his male heir, Edward VI. The son Jane Seymour died delivering. He became king at the tender age of 9. A small, serious boy surrounded by ambitious uncles and advisors who basically ran the country for him. Henry must have rested easy in his grave, next to Jane, as requested, thinking, job done, dynasty secured. Except, Edward died young, very young. He succumbed to illness, probably tuberculosis, in 1553, aged just 15. 15! All that chaos, all that bloodshed, the break with Rome, the executions, all for an heir who didn't even make it to adulthood. Congratulations, Henry. Your grand plan had a spectacularly short shelf life. And then comes the ultimate, glorious, historical irony. Who takes the throne after Edward? The very daughters Henry had discarded, declared illegitimate, and basically written out of the script. First comes Mary I, daughter of the divorced and banished Catherine of Aragon. She tries her best to drag England back to Catholicism, burns quite a few Protestants in the process, earning her the catchy nickname Bloody Mary, and generally makes everyone miserable for 5 years before dying childless. And after Mary, after the son who died young and the Catholic daughter who failed to produce an heir, comes the other daughter, the one Henry really didn't want, the daughter of the beheaded Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth I, the girl whose birth was a national disappointment, the one whose very existence was a reminder of Henry's most scandalous marriage. She takes the throne in 1558, and what does she do? She rules England for 44 years. She defeats the Spanish Armada. She oversees a golden age of culture. She becomes arguably the greatest monarch in English history, a legend, an icon. All without marrying or producing a single heir herself. Thank you very much. It is the ultimate irony. Henry VIII tore his kingdom apart, executed wives, and defied the Pope, all for a male heir who barely left a footnote in history. And his true, lasting legacy? It was secured by the brilliant, formidable daughter he never wanted, born from the wife he threw away and executed. You almost have to laugh. History has a truly wicked sense of humour. Henry thought he was writing his own story, dictating his own legacy, but in the end, it was the daughters he tried to erase who got the final word. And what a word it was. So ends the saga of Henry VIII and his 6 wives. A story of love, loss, ambition, betrayal, beheadings, and some truly terrible decision-making. He broke with Rome, transformed England, and executed thousands. All, fundamentally, because he couldn't keep it in his codpiece. He obsessed over a male heir who died young, while the daughters he discarded became queens who changed the world. In the end, Henry VIII stands as a towering figure in history, a king remembered less for his political maneuvering or religious reforms, and more for his spectacularly disastrous love life. A cautionary tale, perhaps, about the dangers of mixing absolute power with a fragile ego and a wandering eye. And with that final thought on royal romance gone wrong, our time in the chaotic court of Henry VIII is over. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this quiet journey into the past, I hope you'll consider joining me again for another story. But for now, it's time to let the story go. Let the scheming courtiers, the condemned queens, and the furious king all fade away into silence. There is nothing left to worry about, no more heads to roll, just the comfort of your bed and the gentle rhythm of your breathing. May your own relationships be significantly less eventful. Sleep well, and good night.